there's fixed inputs and variable inputs, and then likewise there will be fixed costs and variable costs. So fixed costs, now fixed costs are fixed, right? So they're not going to change if you take the day off or if you work super hard today. Your fixed costs are fixed. They're not going to change. Okay, so fixed cost, the cost of the fixed input and so that will not depend on the quantity of output. And so these are the kinds of costs that you pay for usually up front. And then once they're paid for, right? It's like rent, right? You pay your rent for the month or whatever. Even if you move out early, you're not going to get any money back. So fixed costs are fixed, which makes them also what kind of cost if you're never going to get your money back? Good, so sunk cost. All right, and then variable cost, cost of the variable inputs. And this will depend on output because this is the kind of cost that you pay as you go. So as you produce each unit, you're paying for these types of inputs. And so then as you produce more and more, your variable costs will keep going up and up and up. So it will depend on how much you are producing. Okay, total cost, just the two of those together. And then marginal cost, which you guys have learned about in several chapters now. So that's just the extra cost from one more unit. Okay, so the marginal cost is the extra cost or the change in the total cost when you increase production by 1 unit. But when you increase production by 1 unit, it changes the total cost, but does it change this part? No, just that part, right? So when we say a marginal cost is the change in the total cost, really it's just the change in the variable cost because the fixed cost is fixed. The fixed cost does not change. So the marginal cost is then really just the extra variable cost that you're paying for. All right. So we talked about productivity first. Now, so that was last class. We talked about the production functions, and then I just reviewed it quickly at the beginning. And then we talked about productivity first because that's what explains costs. So the main principle that you learned at the beginning of chapter was the diminishing marginal product of labor, which is that for a firm, when they have a fixed input, like a farmer with land and a couple of tractors, as they hire more and more workers, The workers will have less capital per worker as there's more and more workers hired, and so their productivity goes down. So the return to the farmer of hiring one more worker becomes smaller and smaller as the workers become less productive because they're having to share the capital. And if they're becoming less productive, that means the costs are rising, right? So this is why marginal costs increase. So marginal costs increase for almost all types of production because productivity goes down. Now, in Chapter 9, we talked about a different example about productivity, and that was you guys when you study, right? When you sit down to study, you are most productive in the first hour or so because your brain is fresh and so you can think more clearly. But then as you become tired, you lose productivity. And as you lose productivity, it means you're becoming slower. And so it's becoming more costly to you to try and absorb the material because it takes you longer to read it and remember it. And then, so now we're talking about a different type of loss of productivity that has to do with the capital, which is a fixed input for the producers. But it has the same result. As productivity declines, costs go up. So marginal costs go up. Okay. Let's see. All right. Okay, so all right, so we have a farmer and they are paying rent and they're paying for wages. So the rent that they're paying for the land is $1,000 per month, and that would be what kind of cost? Fixed cost. Okay, so let's fill that in here for fixed cost. So because it's fixed, we would just put $1,000 at each point, because it doesn't matter how many workers they have or how much they're producing, they have to pay the same amount of fixed cost. Okay, variable cost will be the wages per worker, which is $2,000 per worker. Okay, so at 0 workers, then obviously that is 0. 1 worker, 2,000. 2 workers, 2 times 2,000, so 4,000. 3 workers. And then we can calculate the total. So 1,000 plus 0. 1,000 plus 2,000. All right. Okay, so now let's go back to this column and fill in the marginal product of labor. And so that is, let me just put it here. So remember the formula, it's the extra amount of output, so delta Q from 1 extra worker, so delta L. All right, so the first worker increases output by 2,000. The second worker increases output by 1,000. And then 6, 6, 7. All right, and then we have diminishing marginal product of labor. So as the farmer hires more and more workers, the increase in output becomes smaller and smaller. And that's going to cause rising marginal costs, because the marginal cost formula is change in total cost over change in Q. And so we're going to be dividing by this change in Q here. And when this number becomes smaller, so we're going to do the calculation and we're going to keep dividing by a smaller and smaller number, then the result will be a bigger and bigger number. All right, so change in total cost is 2,000, right? So the difference between 3,000 and 1,000, so the $2,000. Change in output from the first worker is 2,000. All right, so that means that the marginal cost per unit for the extra units is $1. So then when they hire the second worker, their total cost also goes up by 2,000, and the total cost will go up by the same amount because the difference in cost between here and here is one extra worker, and the workers cost $2,000 in wages. Okay, so the extra cost is 2,000, but the extra amount of output generated is only 1,000. Okay, so the marginal cost per unit is $2. All right, next worker increases costs by 2,000, but only increases output by 667. Okay, so that will be $3 per unit. Fourth worker increases costs by 2,000 again, and they increase output by 500. All right, and last worker increases costs again by 2,000, but only increases output by 400. So that'll be $5 per unit. Good. Okay, so we can see the inverse relationship here between marginal product and marginal cost. And it's an inverse relationship because for marginal product, the delta Q is on the top, and for marginal cost, the delta Q is on the bottom. And the delta Q is a number that's getting smaller and smaller. So then when we divide by the smaller and smaller number, we get a bigger and bigger cost. Okay. Any questions? Okay. Oh, yeah. Yes, yeah. Yeah, so yeah, this is important, the relationship between MPL and MC. So the marginal product of labor is the extra amount of output generated by one extra worker. The marginal cost is the cost of that extra worker divided by the extra output that they are generating. And so just because the delta Q is on the top here, and you guys in the back, can you please be quiet? Oh, I pressed the button, it didn't go through. You guys in the back, I know you're super excited, but you should calm down. Well, it's still not working. Oh, there we go. Okay. Okay, but yes, this is an important thing here. Yeah, so the relationship between these two. So they're inversely related because the delta Q is going on the top here and on the bottom here. And so then this results in the different shaped curves. The marginal product curve, which has Q here and L here, the marginal product curve goes down because it's a decreasing number. So just like the numbers we generated here, the marginal product decreases. But then what that results in is a rising marginal cost, where we've got Q here and dollars here. So we get a rising marginal cost curve. So they will always go in opposite directions then. Okay, so you have the total cost curve and the marginal cost curve in your notes. Yeah, so you've already got them drawn for you. All right, so yeah, so the marginal cost increases and then the total cost curve increases at an increasing rate because the marginal costs keep increasing. All right, so, just a sec. Oh, no, we've got that next. Okay, great.